Hey everyone, Scrollers Podcast here. Thanks for hanging out with me. We're going to have some fun today. So, we're going to hang out with Margaret Barker. All right, so for those of you who know, you know what that's going to entail. Those of you who don't know, well, you're about to find out. I just like her. I think she's interesting. We could call her an academic. I would say she's a outside the box thinker. She's a United Methodist. What do you call it? Pastor? I don't think it's priest. I grew up UMC Methodist a little bit. So part of, clearly it was a long time ago because I don't remember. I think they called, I don't know. They robed themselves like priests, but I don't think they call themselves priests. Part of this is I can vibe. I get what she's vibing with, even though I don't. Let's see where I agree and disagree. I want to see where you agree and disagree. Basically, in the 90s, early 2000s, she had a lot to say on the temple cult of particularly differences between First and Second Temple Judaism is kind of where her publications were, where her higher learning publications were. And then probably by the mid-2000s onward, she, I would say, well, it kind of flowered into like, there was like a divine feminine figure in the First Temple that those pesky reformists, those Josiahs, those people who wanted to get Judaism, make it great again, make it Mosaic again. She thought that was maybe for the first time that they kind of invented Judaism to get something that's very interestingly, some would say coincidentally, those pesky Jews wanted to get to rid the temple of something that looks a lot like something that a United Methodist liberal pastor priest, female priest would believe. She's probably never going to hear this, but my goal is to one day soon interview her, and I want to chat about these sort of things because, as crazy as what I just described might sound to some of you, there is a lot of good work that, particularly in her earlier stuff, though some in her later stuff, and we're going to get to something radical in another video that I think is pretty fun. That is it takes some teasing apart, and there's just too much. There's probably been 2 decades of people saying, if you quote Margaret Barker, I know where you're coming from, which basically means if you talk about any part of anything she said over her decades-long career, that you are straying from, let's say, quote-unquote mainstream views of what Judaism was, which is just sometimes a code word for what Orthodox Jews today believe about First and Second Temple Judaism. Christians will do the same thing. Christian academics or folks like myself who are just kind of lay readers of these things, these kind of things. So I don't think I'm looking for something. Well, let's just hang out with her for a little bit. That's enough of a preamble. So tonight, before we get started, I have we're going to do a seltzer review. I've got a Pure Aqua Bellevue sparkling water, grapefruit flavored. Flavored sparkling water with other natural flavors. A 12-ounce can, 0 calories per can. So let's give that an open. Don't you love that sound? You know, I tell my wife I could die. If I'm on my deathbed, go ahead and put a fresh can in my hand. Let me pop that open and take the first sip. And I'm ready to go. grapefruit or lime, preferably. If you give me blackberry, I may make sure that you go to the hereafter before myself. But anyway, so let's hang out with Margaret Barker, Dr. Barker, a little bit. Yeah.
Now, when the covenant was in a state of disrepair, it was the duty of the high priest to restore it.
So already we're off to a good start, Queen. Look at her. She's drinking. What is she drinking? Keep calm and carry on. Don't you love it? I think she taught at Temple University. That's in Pennsylvania, right? But clearly, you can tell by the accent. Born and raised British. She's going to take us through a wild ride on her views on what the Day of Atonement is. Now, she rarely will cite sources. We're going to adopt her hermeneutic here. She's been accused of cherry picking from sources that are predisposed, building a narrative that will argue for something that she's already predisposed to believe in, which gives us permission to do the same with her work. So what I've done is I've already gone 17 minutes in past a lot of her what could politely be called nonsense about distinctions between First and Second Temple Judaism, her evidence-free version of that. Love you, Margaret, but it's not working for me. I need some primary sources, and absence of evidence doesn't argue in your favor, frankly. But she's got a view that does carry some weight. That is, I would argue, my sense of the academic landscape is that it is far from a fringe view to understand that the temple came to be understood as the temple system came to be understood as a and maybe all the way back in the time of when the priesthood cult was instituted for Israel. All right, all the way back in the tabernacle. That's a little more speculative. Obviously, there's Orthodox Jewish perspectives who are not comfortable today with the view that the temple is a microcosm, a pattern of a microcosmos, right? Of what is happening above, and it's not a reflection below of what happens above in a heavenly temple space, complete with angelic ritual, liturgy, and an atonement liturgy that represents the Lord Himself as priest and as sacrifice. There's that. Let's say that is bandied about as something that you don't have to quote Barker to get there, basically, and you can have that kind of conversation. A lot of people disagree. A lot of people will agree with that. Barker's not the first person to think of this, but she really bites down on it. So let's hear this queen slay a little bit. That's what she's going with Day of Atonement here.
And this ritual was called atonement.
Hope you guys can hear her.
Temple atonement is very different from the way atonement is understood and taught and preached in certain sections of the
preach, Queen. She's got the Reformation in her sights with this, so she thinks. Keep going. Just speak your truth.
Church today, the Day of Atonement is nothing to do with appeasing an angry God. Atonement.
Look, I was going to say something. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let you preach.
Is the ritual restoration of the covenant, the ritual healing of creation. It's a very complicated ritual. All these ancient rituals are, when you come to read the texts in Leviticus 16, for example, these really are no more than an aide-memoire for people who knew what it was about anyway, and they just got things in the right order and so forth. The Day of Atonement and its meaning in the temple context has to be reconstructed from many, many sources, and clearly I haven't got time to show you those.
Oh, come on. You're not going to give us references. Once again, we're having fun, okay? We're playing jazz. There are primary sources behind where she's going to get at that she doesn't have time to explain. There's no time, but what someone she has in mind is Philo of Alexandria. Someone she has in mind is Josephus. They both, when it comes to the temple itself and the symbolic understandings of the temple, and in the Second Temple period, as a microcosmos, they both largely agree. And where they differ, and we may see this in future videos, where they differ is actually not meaningful differences, different ways of actually reinforcing the same kind of heavenly temple, earthly temple framework. It's interesting when they differ, but it's actually reinforcing the same worldview about that temple. Let's keep it going. Keep slaying, Queen.
All of those this morning. The Day of Atonement was performed by the high priest, and the high priest represented the Lord. Originally, this high priest would have been the Melchizedek priest, the royal high priest. He represents the Lord. He's Emmanuel.
Yeah, so what she's talking about here when she references the Melchizedek priesthood being the original priesthood in the temple is she's referencing her peculiar reconstruction of First Temple Judaism, where the Aaronic priests actually replaced a Melchizedek priesthood. This is kind of where she kind of hand waves and says it's too complicated. You have to reconstruct, i.e., have to kind of use the texts as we have it. The Tanakh, you have to kind of use particularly the priesthood literature of the Old Testament and use it as a Rorschach test to kind of see what you want to see into it. And where you don't like what you see, you can say that that's a redaction by evil, mean Mosaic priesthood. And what you like is a preservation of an earlier priesthood that was nice and didn't believe in atonement like those mean reformers did. Yeah, there's not much more to say to that, but she's got some really interesting things to say about Melchizedek. Now, she's not the only one who rightly points out that there is something very interesting going on in the Hebrew Bible with an idea of a Melchizedek priesthood. And what's particularly interesting is that this is not articulated in detail in the Hebrew Bible itself as to what those references to a Melchizedek priesthood mean, when we know there's only one that's instituted as it documented in a sense that appears to be an institution in time and space at a particular moment, for i.e. the Aaronic priesthood. So where this Melchizedek priesthood plays into this, I mean, there's a lot of midrash on this that comes much later, obviously. Either at the end, at the waning of the Second Temple period, or at its riotous climax, some would say, or much after that, even on what this Melchizedek priesthood is. Or you can go ask the Mormons; they've got some views too. So let's just keep going with her.
He wears the name on his forehead, so he's the visible representation, he's the visible presence of the Lord.
Now, let's be clear. Some of those unnamed sources that she's referring to, they say that the name, the Tetragrammaton, is on the high priest's head, on his turban. Some simply say the name's there. Some say it's holy to the name that is written there. So obviously, very big difference. I'd venture to suggest that obviously one is a lot more controversial for the other, and there's a simple historical literary tool that you could say that is often used and implemented, where if there's a crazier explanation and a less crazy explanation, it's very likely that the less crazy explanation is a redaction meant to temper the craziness of the original, especially if there was something with a divine messianic priest archetype that kind of ran away and wasn't able to be controlled or tampered by the religious authorities. So all that to say, but that's just purely speculation. At very least, there's many reasons to think that there's, and we could do this with primary sources themselves, contemporary to the time of the Second Temple, written in the time of the Second Temple, not merely oral tradition, though those are important too, that there's something really interesting going on with at least by the Second Temple period, of some kind of divine priesthood imagery playing on. And by divine, I'm just saying able to be in that divine realm. So that includes angelic imagery. We're going to see, she's not going to mention it here, but it's important that the priest enters the Holy of Holies, comes out in a radiant white garment. That those with a symbolic ancient Near Eastern understanding of what that would mean would understand that at very least, the high priest has undergone a kind of angelomorphism. That's something I can say without being too controversial. There's a lot of people who attest to that, at least in late Temple. And I would say this is if there's anything historical about Leviticus, if it wasn't written in 100 BC or something, then there's enough, even in Leviticus, to say that there's, and we're going to see her point out, our queen, Margaret Barker, is going to point out some really interesting stuff here about how even way back in Leviticus, even after those pesky redactors got to some things, that for some reason they left some really divine priesthood imagery in here and divine sacrifice
in the temple. Now, on the Day of Atonement, 2 identical goats were chosen. And the fact that they have to be identical in every respect, this is not set out in Leviticus chapter 16, which is the biblical description of the Day of Atonement. You find this in the later expansion in a collection of Jewish texts that was compiled about 200 CE, and it was the deposit of everything that was remembered about temple ritual and procedure and so forth. So all these details about the 2 goats having to be identical comes from this source, which is called the Mishnah.
And I don't know why she's using the term identical. My understanding of Mishnaic text on this is that they just both have to be without blemish. They have to be, the ideal archetypical goat. Goats without issue. So if that makes them both identical, okay. But I don't really think whether or not they're twins is really the idea here.
And the second thing you have to know before you look at this strange ritual is that one of the goats represented the Lord. One of the goats represented the Lord. The ritual actually says, and here we've got it, Leviticus 16:8, Aaron shall cast lots upon the two goats, one lot as the Lord, the other as Azazel. Now, if you look in your English translations, it will say one lot for the Lord and the other for Azazel. Azazel is the leader of the fallen angels. But this translation, which is possible one, raises the huge question of why you are sending an offering
That's a good point.
to the leader of the fallen angels, the demons.
Barker killing it.
Origen, however, great biblical scholar, early 3rd century, understood this text differently and perfectly possible to read the Hebrew this way. The two goats, one lot was not...
Origen, known for his orthodox beliefs, by the way.
The goat to represent the Lord, and the other represented Azazel. The English that you will read says one lot for the Lord, and the other...
It's a great point, Margaret, because Dr. Barker, we're not on a first name basis yet, but if you translate it the way most English translations will do it today, there's trade-offs. You could translate it that way, and you're going to get out of the apparent sticky situation of asking yourself why these goats are representing the Lord, Hashem, and Azazel. But then you're stuck trying to explain why a sacrifice is being performed on Azazel's behalf. So maybe Azazel is being represented by the goat instead, which is kind of my understanding of the Hebrew is it's a slightly more straightforward reading of it, just kind of a bare reading of those terms. If you take that view, regardless of what Origen says, you've got a demonstration of Azazel's banishment to the wastelands, being tossed down a pit, which is very shoved down into the abyss. It's very symbolically meaningful for the story arc of Azazel, the judgment, the fate of Azazel, but then you're left with understanding in the same sense that one goat was Azazel, that another goat was the Lord. That goats, as she said, those pesky reformers are thinking about an angry God. Instead, this temple ritual has blood representing life, so she's going to get into that. But we've got the life of the Lord is going to cover and overshadow and heal, to cleanse and heal the temple, which is a microcosmos of creation, and the people themselves being a priesthood of the microcosmos of creation. So and the high priest himself. So we're going to hear a bit more about that. Sorry, I stole your thunder, Margaret.
So the goat that
Dr.
is
Barker,
sent out
sorry.
into the wilderness, the scapegoat, is sent representing the banishing of Azazel and all his evil.
Were you reading my notes?
The other goat, Aaron shall kill the goat of the sin offering. This is the goat that represents the Lord. Now, the high priest also represents the Lord. This is why this is rather complicated. And so when the goat of the sin offering is killed, the blood of that goat represents the blood of the high priest, who is himself the Lord. So you've got this.
So if that sounds too complicated to be plausible, understand that that's the same thing the Christians are saying and about the Messiah, that he's both high priest and the high priest sacrifice. And it's challenging to think that given the corpus of first century New Testament, Christian texts, Jewish Christian texts that we have, explaining where Jewish Christians are explaining to other, at least on the priestly stuff, largely like the book of Hebrews, largely to other Jewish Christians, that Messianic Jews, anyone, that the way they're explaining it doesn't argue that this understanding of the Day of Atonement of Yom Kippur is they're not introducing this as a new concept to this community. The only thing that they're arguing for is that this guy Jesus ben Miriam of Nazareth is that high priest and that sacrifice of that high priest. Only thing they add, the way they argue is, and you could see it in particularly in Josephus, but also in Philo in different ways, is that this archetype is already in play to some extent. I've never seen, and you can see it in Qumran scrolls a lot with this divine priestly idea, though they're kind of playing around with their own version of it. There's no first century text that is arguing against this approach. It's either neutral, not concerned with this topic, or in vehement support of it. It's the only two approaches that people are doing at this violent climax of the Second Temple period. Violently, as above, so below, messianic, apocalyptic climax of the Second Temple period, where everyone was reading, First Enoch and stuff. So, please continue, Dr. Barker.
It's kind of double substitution. And it's this blood of the goat.
Oh, just to put a pin in it, I'm sorry, I let you go, and then I'm stopping you again. Not to interrupt. But you'd have to argue that Christians all made it up and convinced themselves and each other of it, including hundreds to, it seems like, thousands of Jews, and convinced of this concept, and convinced people that concept, that new introduced concept, applies to this guy named Jesus ben Miriam who was crucified. That's a bigger stretch, I think, than what I think the witness of the Christian New Testament is giving. That a lot of this stuff was already in play. The only new element was pointing to a particular cross at a particular time and saying that the man on that cross is the true and greater reality of what this kind of this heavenly / earthly temple proceeding, this stage play of divine reality, what that means. Like he's the manifestation of that, and I think there's less steps to take, but you have to believe that Second Temple Judaism was a pretty wild and crazy place to go there, and that's what all. And when you read Second Temple Jewish text, it's a wild and crazy place. So I think that this is the conservative view, frankly. So please continue, Dr. Barker.
A high priest that's brought within the veil, and it's sprinkled upon the mercy, well, it's translated mercy seat, kaporet, it literally means the place of atonement, and before the place of atonement. And then, if you read the later, more detailed description,
like how she doesn't like mercy
the
seat.
high priest brings this blood out, and he sprinkles and smears it.
You don't need mercy if you don't have a judging God. I think that's what she's getting at.
That represent the various aspects of the creation. And so symbolically, he sprinkles the blood to cleanse the wound
this is good.
Creation.
This is good
and then
stuff.
He smears it to heal it.
I'm not just
and
talking about my
Leviticus,
grapefruit seltzer.
Says he sprinkles it and smears it upon the altar to cleanse it and consecrate it. So he's cleaning the wounds, and then he is healing them over.
That's so great.
He's restoring the great covenant.
Cleaning the wounds and healing
This
them.
is very, very important. And you have to remember that in temple ritual, or in this temple ritual, blood represents life, not death. Death is what happens when you release the blood of the animal. This is true. But what you are doing is capturing the life. Blood represents life, and there's other passages.
With you on that. I know my ortho bros
example,
would agree too.
That blood is life, and because it's a life that is offered.
Those evil, bloodthirsty reformers
So what you have
that
in this
she's
complicated
imagined
and
would
really
disagree,
dark
but real life
ritual
reformers wouldn't.
of the dead goat, you have the ritual enactment of the Lord offering his own life to heal, cleanse, renew, and restore the whole creation. And this was the great ritual for restoring the eternal covenant. And you will already have jumped in your minds, I'm sure, to the last.
Yes, we've already jumped in our minds to, by eternal covenant, she's thinking of, which is a biblical phrase, and does bear investigation. What she's specifically identifying with the eternal covenant happens to be something that, again, sounds a lot like nice, progressive, liberal, environmentally friendly United Methodist Church Christianity. So with a divine feminine figure in there because patriarchy. So that's her understanding. Very clearly defined, very scarcely sourced. But there is an eternal covenant, and there is an argument. I think on there's very solid footing to say that there is when the Hebrew Bible is talking about the eternal covenant, there's something really interesting going on there. I'm not going to say that it happens to agree with it's the time when all the Jews were Presbyterian or something, but yeah, I'm going to stand on more solid ground than my adventurous friend here is doing.
Supper, because that was what that was all about. So, some more of the atonement text. The goat on which the lot fell as Azazel should be sent into the wilderness as Azazel, Leviticus 16:10. And Jesus being led outside the city was seen as part of this. Jesus led outside the city on Good Friday. Now, Azazel was chiefly evil because he led the fallen angels who had perverted heavenly wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Here I have got two extracts from the book of Enoch.
Yep.
Remember, this was
very popular Jewish text.
But after
return from exile,
condemned it for all sorts of reasons. It faded into insignificance, but it's still part of the scriptures, the Old Testament.
There's a lot of argument. So first, Enoch. There's just speaking on a level. Some would say this is me departing from what would be called Orthodox Judaism, but there's a reason these texts survive in text repositories in synagogues up through the Middle Ages, and there's a reason there's a 1 in front of that Enoch, because there's a second Enoch, there's a third Enoch, and each of them spanned centuries, and they were developed and cherished in Jewish communities, very literate, angel-obsessed Jewish communities in synagogues for, what did I say, the 13th century Spain? So that's 1,500 years. Just, you could call them all heretics. They existed, and they were certainly very popular at this time. Just worth considering. They were though my understanding is Josephus and Philo don't quote First Enoch. Importantly, I've never come across someone saying they do. I've never come across a passage that appears to be a quotation of it. I think it's very sensible to say, given their view of the microcosmos of the temple, that their understanding of and what's happening with the Day of Atonement with Azazel is that there's nothing happening there that would be in profound, explicit disagreement with First Enoch. Because keep in mind, like, beliefs don't exist because someone wrote a book about them. First, a belief exists, and then people start to write books about them, right? And so when you see an example of a certain pattern of belief across various books, that's evidence of the invisible belief being present, manifest, and this is just the material history of that belief. And there's a lot of evidence of the material history of this sort of belief, this fallen angel belief inside of Judaism, native, predating what we call Christianity. It's just later became problematic, I think it's fair to say. We don't. She's going to get into, this is kind of boilerplate First Enoch stuff, so we'll just wrap it up here. I don't want to do too long of a video. I just wanted to get you guys something. Thank you for listening. This is my way of thanking you, particularly as you wait. Some of you know that I'm workshopping something that's a little more involved. It's got some visual, there's some motion graphic kind of thing that we're going to EFAP of Margaret Barker, AI robot Margaret Barker reading one of her papers, which I'm taking excerpts, shamelessly lifting excerpts that I think are important and worth highlighting and discussing, equally shamelessly, bravely and valiantly, righteously disregarding other passages that I think are in Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is a hermeneutic that I learned from her. So, in respect to her hermeneutic, I can take stuff that I think is worth addressing, and not take the rest. But you guys are going to like that. I'm still working on it. I'm about halfway through. in the meantime, I just thought I'd do a hangout session with our friend Margaret Barker, and you can get a taste of the sort of things that she does, and clearly the sort of value that she does, that has, it continues to bring. This is a live stream from just like 2 years ago. Is, I think, is manifest as evidence. I'm not. What we do with the Scrollers podcast is not. We're not always trying to just find things we agree with. We're really just trying to investigate and understand and document the existence of a belief and understand it from the inside out. And when it comes to Barker, I'm only going to do that with the things that I like. I won't do that with other things. But we're having a little fun here. You could feel free to investigate her on your own, and you can find the things that you like and disagree with. But thanks for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed this. This is a little low tech, low res version of other stuff that's coming down the pike. We're going to be doing a lot more pre-recorded and particularly live streams, which I think you guys are going to dig. So thanks. Hope you subscribed. Hope you shared this with friends. Hope you were entertained as well as educated. And feel free to make fun of me in the comments section. So with that, I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.